Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. Good to have one of our copper stories, a sponsor of the show, in Giulio Bonifacio from Alta Copper. And they had some news out that I find quite important in that it falls into something that I've been talking about lately. But let's first talk about the news. Giulio, you guys announced that Fortescue is doing a premium priced placement, and it's closed. So you got it done real quickly.
Yeah, Alan, I mean, and thanks as always for having us on. Yeah, clearly on Alta Copper, you've got Fortescue, and as we've mentioned before, it's a $60 billion plus company that's very interested in the EV thematic and decarbonization and critical metals. And they've been very supportive, shown a lot of interest. I think clearly with their balance sheet, they're potentially a logical buyer of the company at some point. Valuation for us is very key. With that said, though, when you look at the challenging, and I was listening to a few of your other programs, challenging capital markets for many junior companies in terms of capital, and you typically see capital raised by way of discounted share price to market with a full warrant, binders fees, legal. And so when you bake that all in, there was a lot of interest in Alta Copper, and we did do the reset, name change, share consolidation, but that was really to set us up for what's potentially coming here in the next 12 to 24 months. And I think it's going to be a very exciting period. Copper prices will continue to trade at this range, and some folks would suggest significantly higher. That I would agree with that. But if you can demonstrate that you've got a project that's extremely robust and profitable, even at these price points, even at a discounted price from where we're at today, I think that's very interesting. But when you look at the financing, we did it at a close to a 50% premium to market, no warrant. The shares are held in strong hands. Their ownership position increases to 30%, 31%. That doesn't change anything. At the end of the day, there's many companies that have large strategic shareholders in the background, and their shareholders have done extremely well. And I got some commentary on, oh my gosh, that's not a good thing. I think that's the most silly comment possible. I mean, at the end of the day, there's been a break in the capital markets. There's been a real shift. And if you have a strategic shareholder that's got that size, do not forget that the other shareholders have to agree on any takeout value. And from my standpoint, I do have a bit of a copper background. I've done well on two previous transactions. This is one of the best assets out there. I mean, you can talk about the Fortescue, you can talk about community. I think you'll start to see us deal with that appropriately. Peru is opening up in a very significant way because they know they need that capital investment. And you look at Safranel and the approval they got from Synasys. You look at what they've come out publicly with recently, that they want to support, and streamline the regulatory timeline, if you will. And then, more importantly, any report, technical or otherwise, deals with the other issue, which in our case isn't all that insurmountable. And I also get a bit of a chuckle on this, and I don't want to sound so brash, but yeah, sure, we carry arsenic on the project, but we have a saleable copper concentrate. The secondary deposit carries no arsenic, and so when you look at it from a commingling perspective, you can also look at it from if you put a roaster in to deal with it. But at the end of the day, we're not likely the builder of the project, so it's really about how do you advance the three areas that we can do a very good job in, and that's move forward with the community. Now,
well, obviously, Fortescue doesn't see it as a big problem.
They don't at all. I mean, and what's interesting, and glad for that you added that comment. They don't see it as a problem. They're willing to buy and add to their investment at a premium to market, which is refinancing we've done in 2023 has been at a significant premium to market. But you also have Middle Consulting, who are the engineers of the engineers, and they come in by way of equity, and they've got that in copper as well. And they're convinced that this is a tier one asset, as am I. And so when you look at some of the rhetoric in history, and it is worth talking about because it does come up periodically, we're going to deal with that and manage that process. And I think that in itself will put us in good stead. We made the submission on the drill permit. We expect to get that by Q1. We don't want to start drilling until Q2, Q3. So there's no funding need for that. The major catalyst for us is this upcoming optimized PEA, which will be very robust. I mean, I can only message it to a certain point, but to date, we're pretty excited about what it looks like. Clearly there's a lot more work to be done, but you have two significantly strong groups on the engineering side in Ausenco, as well as Riddle Consulting working on it with our
Yeah,
group.
and that's quite interesting to me as well, Julio, because Whittle is really good at optimizing projects. They did a great job at McEwen Copper's Los Azules, and these guys know how to make a difference, and that's the big difference between your last PEA and this PEA.
That's one of the biggest differences, but one of the clear distinguishing features of this will be the fact that we'll include Kenny Reserve, which sits on 2.2 billion pounds of copper, gold, and silver, doesn't carry arsenic. We'll also look at a differing process rate, probably closer to 120,000 tons a day. At the end of the day, you have to look at the realities that the margins will be far more robust at an increased daily throughput rate. It'll generate a project that'll produce north of 325 million pounds of copper per year. That is a very significant project of size, and certain strategic groups of size, including our big shareholder, have looked at it and said, hey, for companies that have a balance sheet, your capital cost incremental increase won't be overly significant relative to the returns that you'll generate from an IRR perspective and payback perspective. And appreciating from the outset, like many copper developers, not just us, single asset companies, and I remain convinced on this point, regardless of whether it's $500 million to $1 billion to $2 billion, they should not be building those projects. And for them to suggest that they will is clearly not the reality. You need a company that's got a balance sheet that can support it, that has the execution team. And so for us, it's, hey, move forward on the study.
And are hungry. They need these kind of projects.
They do, and they need projects of size, right? And you're already
Right.
sitting on, and I've mentioned this in times past, and I will continue to do so, but the amount of success that Joanne Fries has had with the drilling program that stopped in 2013, on the back of 85,000 meters of drilling, you're already sitting on 16 billion pounds of copper, gold, and silver, copper equivalent. You could break it down further if you chose to. You can look at our presentation material, but that in itself is very, very significant. And then you overlay the fact that
Huge.
you've got a 0.66 to 1 strip ratio. Of course, that will increase as it increases.
And you put it into the context of projects that are in development, and it makes it one of the top 10 worldwide owned by a junior in grade and size. And that's what the majors are looking for, long-lived projects that they can make money on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, and then, in fact, any success we have by way of the drill bit, and I think we will have success because there's significant high priority targets that we've identified by way of our 3D geological modeling, both in Norte, Sur, and Verde, which has not been drilled, but it has the right geological signatures. And you compare that to other porphyry systems and the amount of drilling that's been done, that comparison itself should tell you that this is going to get potentially a lot larger. And I say potentially because, you have to prove that by way of the drill bit. But, at the end of the day, as you do that, all that really does is enhances the opportunity for all Alta Copper shareholders. You've got the study that will be very robust. You've got the drilling that's going to demonstrate that there's growth in size in terms of tonnage. The grade is a very good grade for an open pit with a modest strip ratio. You start adding all those things up, the various discussions we have, at the end of the day, whoever buys this company, and I don't want to suggest, like many juniors, that it's all about, hey, we're going to drill it and get taken out. It's really about executing on the project side, but then also fostering those discussions with various groups. And I think that, with what we've done with Fortescue.
Well, another thing is too, Julio, is lots of juniors can say that they want to get bought out, but do they have the project that can get bought out and is needed? When you are in the top 10 in the world of undeveloped copper projects in size and grade, these are the things that major mining companies need. They see the writing on the wall. The market may not see the writing on the wall, but these majors, they've got all the statistics. They know what's happening in their minds. They have all the data. And I find it very encouraging that you've got a partner there, a big shareholder that's willing to give you money at a premium to the market with no warrant.
I would completely agree. And further to your point about other companies, I mean, many of them have earlier stage projects and, some of them had good level of success, but to take a project from discovery to advanced study work to feasibility and permitting, that's a long drawn out process. And some would argue, 15 to 20 years. We're already 10 years into the curve on this one at the very least. The one thing I will say, and it's not a critique, but the markets have been pretty challenging. So, when I looked at Cadente Copper, which is now Alta Copper, it was no surprise that it was on care and maintenance for such a long time. Our first real active year of business was in 2023. We've done a lot of good things in 2023. You can look at the previous press release we put out on some of the advances at the community level. The talking heads, to use a term, I mean, those guys aren't the builders anyway, right? At the end of the day, it's, if we move forward with a fantastic study and a robust set of economics with margin, and it's to a point where.
Well, I also think that it's been pretty impressive that you kind of went from what was perceived as a bit of a challenging period with your big shareholder, and now your big shareholder is on side and they're helping you guys move forward.
Well, thank you for saying that. And it was really more about, working with them appropriately as you'd expect us to, and using them as an ally in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And then you look at the recent board addition, he's there for one reason. He's a builder, and he's
one of the top builders they have at Fortescue.
Exactly. And then when you look at it from that standpoint, but you also appreciate that, management's sole responsibility, and I gotta be very clear about that, our fiduciary responsibility is to ensure we get a proper valuation on this. And, I think I've demonstrated by the fact that, I've accumulated a pretty large position, and as well as some of my, colleagues and associates. This is really about what the opportunity represents, and I think it's going to be very interesting. The market as a whole, and I know you know this well, let's be frank, all copper developers have come off in value in a very significant way. So to suggest that we should be any different, and plus, the share consolidation, we knew that was going to trigger certain selling. And of course that's happened, but we continue to bring in a stronger shareholder registry base. Do not forget, and I've got to repeat this, anything that the company does has to be supported by management and the team, and we do appreciate value. I understand the value curve on this one. I don't see any downside per se. I see nothing but upside. The only thing I can answer for you at this stage is, and that's context of market to a certain extent, and I know many CEOs will say this and executive chairs will say this, but not the downside, it's the upside. Is it a 3-bagger or is it a 10-bagger? Do you know what I mean? Like when you look at the substance, you look at the amount of work that's been done on this project to replicate it, to get it this far along, it matches up very, very nicely. And so I'm very much a believer that, it's about management's ability to execute on a plan, have a firm strategy. We've got that, but appreciate that, whether Fortescue owns 25% or 30% or 35%, that doesn't change anything. It's about they have to buy out the remaining shareholders. And you look at case in point, Rio Tinto and Ivanhoe. I think that worked out pretty well for Mr. Friedland.
Well,
Rio Tinto had a significant stake, and I could go through a list of a number of different companies that have shareholders that own 40-45%, and it hasn't worked against them. And so, when I see a certain investor comment, and I do look at the boards on occasion, oh my gosh, they're giving it away. Are you kidding me? Would you rather us do a financing at 30 cents with a full warrant when we could do a financing with a big shareholder who's very supportive at a premium to market with no warrant? None of those shares will come into the market. And anyone that understands the current context of the market, when you include a warrant, what happens? Your atypical investor, because of the challenge in the marketplace, sells the shares and sits on the warrant for free. That is unfortunately the reality of what
I don't really get that, Julio, because if I'm going to buy a share and a warrant, if I don't want to own the shares, I don't want to own the warrant either.
Hey, Allan, on that point, I completely agree with you. From my perspective, it's about leverage, but that's unfortunately what you see. And
yeah, all the time. One thing that I've been talking a lot lately about the food chain of the mining business, and that the major mining companies are mining out deposits and they need to replace them. In the copper situation, you got a lot of demand coming in the future, and not enough supply. And so those majors, then they got to look at the smaller miners, the mid tiers, and the developers. And there's not enough in that pipeline to replace what they're mining all the time. And then you've got the explorers, and there's not enough exploration funding and patient shareholders to help put more projects in the development stage. So from the smallest to the biggest, the chain is broken. And I believe what's going to happen, and it's a credible timing because I've been talking a lot about this lately, is that I see a point where those major mining companies are going to have to start doing more friendly deals, sort of to fund and to support development and exploration. And we're starting to see some of that, even in the copper space. Hercules Copper, one drill hole, and Barrick has almost put $30 million. And Barrick's a very selective buyer. And what that tells me is that that's a junior-friendly deal. This deal that you just did is a very junior-friendly deal, financing. And in my career, I've been in this since 1993. Most of my career, until about the last 2-3 years, all I've seen are junior punishing deals. So I think that there's a lot of majors out there that are going to want to be the partner of choice for the smaller companies. And if you go out there and you abuse the smaller companies, you're not going to be the partner of choice. And I think that also plays a role in future takeovers, to develop projects and build mines that the majors are not going to want to be thought of as predatory like they have been in the past. And so it was really interesting timing that you did what I've been talking about, which is junior-friendly deals for financing.
But, I think that you'll see a lot more of those. I think as well, the sense of urgency, over the last couple of years hasn't really been there for a lot of the majors and capital investors. And that will change if you look at the gold tape and what's going on there. And you could spend a lot of time talking about dovish versus hawkish and what the Fed came out with. And, I do follow the gold space. I chair another company that is doing very, very well, that is also in the same region as Hercules Copper. But no, I would agree with you that is going to change, and demonstrating friendly deals with junior companies is very important, because the exploration, discovery, and what that represents is what's going to replace the depleting reserves and resources that exist out there. But
Well, that's the other
also,
point I'm making, is a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
I think the other thing too, it was an interesting analogy, and again, I've been in the space probably as long as you, if not longer. There's been sort of a vacuum in the space for a while in terms of capital investment, and sure, you have mining specific individuals that continue to invest, and those are the folks in this kind of market that will do extremely well. And I'm very active as well, for that reason. But when that generalist money starts to kick back in, and you look at the copper space specifically, let's talk about that just briefly. China has slowed. That put a bit of a damper on what was going on in the copper space. People started to realize that transition wasn't going to happen as quickly as they thought, but that doesn't mean we don't see that occurrence. Copper prices are settling in here. You look at the structural break and the supply deficit curve purely on that, without the EV thematic and decarbonization. That alone, that deficit will drive the price a lot higher. You add that outer layer, and that'll go. As that starts to happen, though, you're going to get the generalist money that looks at what they need to be doing, and they'll start investing in the sector, which has been undercapitalized for a long period of time. I think you'll still get the same. You'll get the same effect in the gold space. The water level will come down. Of course, it's going to be the majors first, as it should be. It'll move to the mid caps. It'll move to the small caps. It will do that. But we're going to be in a very exciting period here, and I think a lot of folks out there that are a lot smarter than me have been saying this for a while. I'm very much convinced that what happens in the next 12 to 36 months in our sector will allow that capital to come back in. And the analogy that was put forth is like, have a Scotch glass and you fill that Scotch glass, but it just overflows so quickly because there's just so much interest that comes into the space. We haven't had that for a while. I don't think people realize what's going on here in copper, precious metals across the board, and it has been a sector, the mining sector, that has kind of taken it on the nose here for the last few years. I do think that starts to change. I think discoveries like we've seen with Hercules Copper on one drill hole to bring in the amount of investment they've brought in, that's very significant. I think that entire area though is going to be a hot area for a period of time here. There'll be further discoveries that come from that. But that also highlights gold companies that are appreciating very clearly that they need to get into the copper space. So, I mean, that's an interesting sort of change.
Well, from
Typically
a
10 years ago, right?
from a big picture perspective, now if I'm right, which I'm seeing signs that I will be, that majors are going to want to be the partner of choice in supporting and ultimately buying out companies at reasonable prices. It's very interesting to me that there is more attention coming into gold, but it's the friendly deals so far have been predominantly on the copper space. Speaking of McEwen Copper, they did a deal where Stellantis did a very favorable financing, and Newton, the venture of Rio Tinto, put a lot of money into McEwen Copper. You've got Barrick now putting money into Hercules Silver on very favorable terms. And now you've done this deal on very favorable terms. It's people can talk about, well, what's happening immediately in front of us over the next 3 to 6 months. But those actions speak volumes to me about what the majors see. They have all the data. They crunch the numbers. They know they need copper. And it's interesting that this shift to more and more junior friendly deals is happening primarily in the copper so far.
I mean, totally agree. And I think, the shift in terms of the space and the funding sources, I think, having a strong supportive shareholder is nothing but a benefit across the board. And the shift is going to continue to take place here. It really does get back to margins on copper projects and what that ultimately represents. And, as you said earlier, there's not many advanced copper projects out there. And, unfortunately for us, Alta Copper has one that has been in existence for 20 years and has had nothing but success by way of the drill bit. And, of course, challenges in the marketplace, et cetera. But, we're here to change that. I would also add that we've been very mindful of what we do. If you look at financings this year, probably $10 million in total. If you add it all up, all at 50 to 72 cents, well above our market. That should be looked at in a very favorable way. I would also add that this most recent financing, we could have done a substantially larger amount with Fortescue. There was that much interest. We opted to keep it within a certain level. We wanted to get to a certain point. We know that we've got a major catalyst coming in the PEA that's probably going to come out, Q1, later Q1, I think, based on what we see, because we're adding a lot to it. Now, one should never expect to see an immediate effect, but I think you will see a pretty immediate effect as a result of that. When you start looking at the valuations, you look at IRR, you look at returns, you look at the fact that this can, in fact, produce north of 150,000 tons of copper per annum. Not many projects can, right? And so, yeah. And then you look at the size of Fortescue. People, I don't know why, but iron ore, earth bulk miner, I mean, they've made nothing but returns for their shareholders. They give out a pretty generous dividend. Realize how large they are. And compare them to certain other companies that you already mentioned. They would be in that top tier.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting.
Compared to some of those gold companies you mentioned, they're bigger.
Yes.
And so can't folks appreciate that there must be a reason that they are as invested in, focused in on our little Alta
And it's
Copper,
not just
which is not little, by the way, but I just reference that by way of the market cap more than anything else. Sorry, Allan.
You can also look at it from there's a people problem in the industry as well. We don't have enough great people in the industry because of the the past fluctuations in the price for copper and gold and other metals. I think it's lost on a lot of people that Fortescue, the guy they put on your board of directors as their representative, is one of their top mine builders. What does that tell people? I know what it tells me.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that and picking up on that, because that's kind of a key point. And, as well, we have a very strong technical committee, and he'll be on it, as you'd expect. And he'll have the ability to get a real good understanding of what's being proposed here in this upcoming PA. That, if anything, just helps us with respect to all other discussions. And at the end of the day, it is about advancing on the technical study side, advancing the community, drilling. I'm very excited about what that potentially represents. That just makes our job that much simpler if you can demonstrate that it's even that much bigger than what we already have, most of which is measured and indicated. And then, when you look at what the next lever is for value, it's about the type of transactions you can put in place, right? If, for example, we put another transaction in place that substantiates value on the back of this upcoming PEA, the value starts to change, right? And then if folks did their homework and went and looked at it and said, okay, well, let's just take a look at the project. It's got no burdens. It's only got a 0.5% NSR compared to most projects that have 2, 3, 4, 5%. It's got a big supportive shareholder in the background that is there for a reason. It's got a little consulting who stepped into it on their own, based on their own research, and said, hey, we want to get involved with this. We like it. We've done this before. This is what we do. We've changed our model a little bit. We know that we can do very, very well by way of equity returns. That, the placement that they did with us was, for them, a large amount, $500,000 at 72 cents. But, that speaks volumes, right? And so, and then, as some of these bigger companies start stepping into these smaller juniors, including ours, like we've seen with Fortescue, I think that's going to start changing the context of the market from a value perspective. But not just Alta Copper. There's many undervalued projects and companies out there, and once the re-rating starts to take place, and it will take place, I think.
Well, that's I spend a lot of time looking at the Lassonde curve, and not because of its precision. Okay, it's a general trend, right?
Mhm.
And so as I spoke earlier about the need for majors to go down the food chain. And so one of the parts, there's a big run up in the exploration success, and then a big run up when you have moved towards mining. And then there's the development discount window. And everybody looks at the development discount window because it's called that, or the orphan phase. And for a long time, they thought of that as, oh no, it's the development discount window. I got to stay away. But I think it could become much more exciting because of the state of the mining business. There just aren't enough companies in that development discount window for the majors to go have a shopping list. And that's where you guys are. And in that development discount window, if you then sort of evaluate on size and grade, you guys bubble to the top of that development discount window. So going forward, I think companies in that part of the Lassonde curve are going to become increasingly more important.
Well, there's one other thing, if I could, and I agree with your comments on the Lassonde curve and the development discount, but the one variable that we have that certain other projects may not have is, by us going back in with a drilling program, and that was one of the first initiatives that I was very keen about that. I think the valuation that you can add by way of the drill bit is significant. We still have that discovery potential. For example, on that secondary deposit, not that we have to convert our inferred. It's not conversion drilling we're doing expansion drilling. And so, as we add to Canerico Sur and Verde, we very much believe that that's one distinct porphyry system in itself that potentially connects, right? If you look at the distance, 4 kilometers top to bottom, you look at the space between the Norte and Sur, and you look at Verde, the opportunity, and there's been some really good examples of that. You look at, again, we've had nothing but success, but the valuation lift on Los Filos, the valuation lift on NGX was by way of the drill bit, was not by way of anything else. I mean, of course, they're already sitting on something of size and significance, and clearly a very strong group behind them, as we all know. But at the end of the day, you have advanced, steady, robust economics, the ability to advance in certain areas. You've got a strong supportive shareholder, but you also have further opportunity by way of the drill bit. And one should never understate that. Like if I come back to you, and not I or Joanne, because she's led that charge in a very effective way, comes back on your program and say 8 months when we started our first drilling, and we come back with a staggering result. That only drives the valuation in one direction, and that just helps us relative to all these other discussions that take place over that period of time, including those discussions with our big shareholder. Like I think you touched on it, and I appreciate it, but we've managed that situation. They were pretty challenging to deal with back June of 2022. We're past that. You can see it; it's very clear. And so I think
well, you turned a challenging situation into a impressive supportive situation. Now they're giving you money at a premium to the market with no warrant. That's a huge difference. And they put one of their top mining guys on your board of directors.
Exactly, and they've got size, and anything that they do, I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. Anything that they do with us, if we get there and we're in agreement, is a rounding error for them. Whether it's $1, $3, $5, that's a rounding error for that group.
Yeah, they're huge.
Historically, the valuation I could then take based on the last cycle that we had post global financial crisis, all stuff that I knew, because I've known Joanne for years and years and years, and that's how this all sort of occurred after I had some free time after my last 2 copper companies. Had a valuation market cap of $200 million. I mean, that was based on a small resource, economics not as attractive, and all these other things that I think we've added. So I think we're going to bridge the gap on that valuation, I think, in the coming year. Not going to suggest that's an easy thing to do, because it's really about executing on all levels. But as you do that, you start to bridge the gap, and the valuations can change. Not just for us, but I could point out a few other copper developers that I think are undervalued. I could also point out a couple that I think are trading at a fair value. And where do we sit on the curve? You've seen my little chart on that. I don't think you value these things on a penny per pound basis, but that's a good measure to simplistically show, hey, here we're sitting on a bigger resource. We've got better economics. Factor in the Peru discount if you choose to. Look at these other companies and look at.
And you're trading for a fraction of a penny.
Yeah, but I mean,
of the
close off and I've taken far too much of your time today, but permitting, like I've permitted the biggest copper project in the American Southwest in the last 25 years, so I get that. So you telling me just because it's in the American Southwest, it should trade at a premium? And the folks and the people that speak to that don't know enough about the process. How many projects in the American Southwest are having some challenges? How many other projects in the United States are having some challenges? It's about jurisdiction. It's about, are you dealing with the U.S. Corps of Engineers? Are you dealing with the U.S. Forest Service? Do you have a 404 permit issue? You know what I mean? There's a lot of variables. And even in British Columbia, my gosh, don't get me wrong. We're Canadian. I love British Columbia. Projects are going to have a tough time even getting their drill permits, right? So it is really about location. And every jurisdiction that you deal with will have its specific.
You've got to stick handle your way through.
Exactly. And you look at our project, it's in northern Peru. They're very supportive. Sure, there were some challenges historically. That was an illegal protest. That group is no longer in the community. We're well past it. That was in 2012, and then we got a community agreement in 2013. So is it a process we have to manage? Of course it is. But every process that you deal with from a regulatory community perspective is a process that you have to deal with and manage effectively. And the benefit right now is that community, for the first time in a while, has now seen that we're back at work in a very significant way.
And you've got somebody, I mean, I live in Mexico, and I understand that if you have a project in Mexico, it's good to have an executive in Mexico. And in Peru, you've got Joanne Fries, who's been kicking rocks and doing work there for a quarter of a century. She's built up those handshaking relationships. with the locals and the provincial governments and the federal government. And that speaks volumes about what you're talking about in the need to move things forward. Doesn't matter what country you are, if you can go and shake hands with the local people and they know who you are because of all your experience, that in itself is a pretty important cog in the wheel, if you will.
Well, I mean, the other gentleman we have on our board is a former mines minister of Peru, Miguel Inchowski, right? So, yeah, and one of the benefits of this past year and the money that was raised was to be more active in the community and open community offices. And so, we want to continue to be advancing those discussions. But relationships matter; they always do. And as he's noted, Joanne's been there for a long, long time. She's forged fantastic relationships. But in fairness, company was effectively inactive for an extended period of time, so the community itself didn't benefit. And so, I mentioned drilling earlier. There's another benefit that comes from that. We in the last drilling program employed almost 250 community members. As they start seeing that activity, if they start appreciating, and then the workshop that we held, we were not expecting the numbers that we received. I think we had over 300 participants, and you can look at the photo that was included in the last press release or on our website, and you'll see that it was well attended, but nothing but support. And the reality that people do need to appreciate is you're never going to get 100% support on any project, nor do we expect it. However, if we can get majority support, and we believe we can, that gets us to where we need to get to, right? And so that's kind of a key point. But that applies in whatever jurisdiction you're in. And one needs to pay attention to what that looks like and how it's managed. And I think the mere fact that Joanne's been there for such an extended period of time, she spent time in the community. We've also hired recent community graduates that went to university for the first time and they work for us. I mean, that all bridges the gap the way we need. And it is about communicating and making it very clear that it's a net benefit, not a net negative, right? It's a benefit. We're not going to displace you. We're not going to relocate you. The project is far enough away removed that it doesn't affect their day-to-day lives in terms of farming and things that they want to do. And so, communicating that, and I think Joanne's done a fantastic job with that with our team. Further supports what we're trying to do. But at the end of the day, it gets back to, hey, what are we focused in on? How are we going to advance it? The market will follow. It always does. The market isn't all that efficient when we're dealing with the type of negative marketplace we've experienced over the last couple of years. You are always going to have investors that get fatigued, they get tired. I just think it's one of the best copper opportunities out there from a value driver perspective, because the valuation is still very, very modest. And I think if folks appreciate that and understand it, there's very little downside. And by the way, why would I have stepped in and put meaningful money on this over the last 12 months if I didn't believe that, right? And that's arguably what it's about. It's about how you make returns on your equity, and the copper space is a great space to be in. And projects like this, there's not many of them, right? There's just
No, anywhere along the food chain, there's just not enough copper for what's coming ahead of us, Julio.
Totally agree. Thank you, Allan, as always. And
yeah, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks a lot, Julio. So there you go, folks. In Alta Copper, you have a very special situation. And I hope it's not lost on people that, we're starting to see some of these junior friendly, in this case of financing, to move the company forward at a premium to the market, and not just a little premium, a pretty significant premium. I also think it's important to note that Fortescue has put one of their top mine builders on the board of directors of Alta. And I think that sends messages that they believe that this could be a future mine. And we need these kind of projects in the copper space. And having someone like Fortescue cutting checks and putting their top people on is really important to me. Additionally, I'm looking forward to future drilling. I remember when this project was being drilled and the kind of grades and thicknesses that were coming out of it. And so I'm looking forward to more drilling, and I'm looking forward to that preliminary economic assessment that is an optimized preliminary economic assessment, in that Whittle has done a lot of work that will go into that preliminary economic assessment. And I also like the fact that they're going big with the development scenario. They're not looking at this as a small starter pit and then build it up from there. Because what the big mining companies need now are these big projects. And so you want to give them the data that, shows that this could be something that could be developed by a major mining company with a long life and good internal rate of return and that sort of stuff, based on current prices. And I think prices are going much higher for copper. Robert Friedland talks about the need for it to, get significantly higher and stay up there for a long time. And then I'm always on the lookout for copper projects, and I can't find enough of them, whether it's at exploration or developments or new mining. So I believe Alta Copper is a very unique story. They are a sponsor, so do your homework. Bear in mind that they pay me to create content, but I've spent 30 years in this business, and every company, whether there's someone I pick or sponsors, they all fall under this. They got to go through the same filter. And that filter's been built up on 30 years of experience in this business. And I can be comfortable in saying that Alta Copper has a very unique situation. And do your homework, speak with your financial advisors. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.